What's up, guys? Welcome back to the home slice. If you've been following along with my tournament, we're going to start into the semifinals today. All right, this is the genesis sort of the tournament so far. It's sort of a ragtag tournament because I started out with kind of the things that didn't fit super cleanly in the other categories of the tournaments that I'm going to do in the future. But be that as it may, we've got some really interesting numbers. We've got some really interesting observations. I realize the initial best is all over the show, that some of them are 130. Some of them I didn't test because I wanted to test aggressive edge, but there's purpose behind all of those. I think the major omissions that should be noted is that the buck is sharper than everything because it's at a narrower edge angle, and I ground it to like 0.004 of an inch behind the edge. And the Manix 2 got the worst, even though it's in SPY 27 steel, final reading because I actually stropped it on a hanging strop, which is not conducive to that steel. Other than that, you can kind of see things landing in the 200 to 260 grams category after a week or two of use. And I guess it should be noted that also all knives have been stropped for that reading, but the Buck 110 and the Spyderco Manix 2 actually endured 2 weeks, not 1 week of use. And so that's another reason why the number is higher on the Spyderco. But that thin geometry really saved the Buck 110. These are the knives that have gone so far, and so today we'll be filling in the next sort of tier of the tournament and carrying against one another the winners from that tournament. And what I've decided is I've given each of these blades an intro and given the specs on them, so we're going to move through this pretty quickly. But I've already given them each 1 week in pocket by themselves to sort of assess how they are as a standalone. So this week, I'm going to carry the first two winners at the same time. And the one that wins this is going to be the one that I actually end up reaching for most often. Next week, I'll do the same with the other two winners, and then I'll film a recap to this video. So you'll skip ahead in time to the recap, and I'll tell you which one I liked better. So for our first week and our first bit of use, we're going to feature the Buck 110 that I reprofiled in a fullo grind, ground these shoulders off. Those mirror polished parts are for me down to about 5/1000ths behind the edge. At the same time, I'm going to carry the winner from the second part of the tournament, the CJRB Pyrite. This buck is the last hollow ground blade that's surviving in the tournament so far, and it will be interesting to see whether I reach for like ultimate slicey profile and good edge length or convenience. The Pyrite is definitely a bit more of a convenient knife to open. Likewise, next week, I'll be carrying the Civivi Imperium Nitro V folder with carbon fiber shred handles. Really like the overall outline and the design of this knife. It's just about everything I want a drop point to be if I'm looking for a slicey or EDC drop point, not like a heavy-duty work drop point. At the same time that I have that, I will have this clip point Kershaw Federalist in 154 cm in my pocket, and we'll see again whether I reach for the more convenient knife with a bit more edge length, or if I reach for the knife that's got a higher grind and operates a bit more slicey. At the end of the video, I'll let you know which of these two is headed on to the actual final, which I think I'll carry them for about 3 weeks each during my visit to America that is coming up soon. And we'll do a bit of a more extended carry session for the two winners before we declare one the ultimate winner of this eclectic first EDC tournament and get on to our next one. Well, I'm actually having to draw this one to a close ahead of time from what I had expected because my father-in-law was recently in an accident and received a fairly serious injury, and so I'm flying home to the US to help him out. But I have carried each of these for some time, and I am ready to decide at least which blades will go on to the final, but the final will have to wait until I get back from the USA. Starting out with the Buck and the Pyrite, I think In this test, each stage has been hollow grind versus flat grind, and I have noted that in every single case I do prefer a thin flat grind, except in the case of this buck. Now, part of that was because I messed up the edge on the Spyderco Manix 2 and CPM Spy 27, and I've come to realize since then that the Spyderco CBN stones displace a lot of metal, and that leads you to a really aggressive, like chunky edge on the Victorinox knives I was testing initially. But on all of these harder knives that are up above 55, 56 Rockwell, I have actually found that the amount of metal that those stones move leads to areas acting sort of like a wire edge, where the edge wants to roll over or chip out a little bit more easily. I was going to sharpen them all the same, but it ended up that I happened to not have my CBN stone around in the time when I sharpened the leek and pyrite, and so I just sharpened them on diamond, my old school dual grit way, and I have to say, I holistically 100% like it better, and it's actually more stable. Let me grab a piece of paper. So every edge that I have done the CBN 400 grit and Suhiro Serax protocol on, this one is really keen still because it's so thin behind the edge, but there are actually points where it doesn't really want to cut. There's one there, I'll go through it. And so with all of the knives that I sharpened with that Spyderco CBN stone, they've developed little areas where the edge kind of wants to catch, and it forms a little bit of kind of a dead spot. Every single knife sharpened that way has done this. Yeah, you can see it tore there and then it cut. Even this one, which is very, very thin behind the edge, it's at a very, very slicey geometry so that it can be stropped back over and over and over and over again. So one thing that I've noted for future is that I want to probably stray away from the Spyderco CBN stone on my dual grit edges. It may have something to do with the stuff that everybody else shows where the edges kind of like stick out really aggressive, and that may be leading to this sort of wire edge effect. I'm not sure, but in any case, it's not my favorite for edge durability overall. Versus the edge on this pyrite, which was sharpened on diamond. It's not as keen of an edge, but it doesn't have any spots yet that are failing to function after stropping. And that sort of brings me to my sort of conclusion for this arm of the tournament, and I'm going to have to give it to the CJRB Pyrite. There's a few reasons there. I mean, part of this test is like sliciness, which is better on this one, versus absolute convenience and small carry size and really accessible action that's really easy to deploy and get back in. So convenience versus sliciness. And I loved the sliciness of this one, and I would reach for them almost exactly the same amount. But what I find here at the end is that after the 3 weeks that this edge has put in, which is amazing, it is starting to lose its aggression finally, even though it's been thinned down to 5/1000ths behind the edge. And it's starting to develop dead spots where the working edge on this AR RPM 9 just keeps stropping back. And I do find that I am tempted to just reach for the convenience of this one as well. However, I have to say that my follow grind experiment was a success because there's not a lot overall to draw me in the sort of priorities and values that I have with a pocket knife. There's not a lot to draw me to the Buck 110 as an everyday carry overall. And yet it has gone through some different stages of the tournament and won against other knives, which I would have thought I would have liked better. And also all the other hollow ground knives, I didn't like how they bound up. So this relief of carving out the shoulder of the grind a little bit really makes a big difference for me. And it actually is a success in the sense that this brings hollow grind back into the things that I really enjoy and I'm really interested in. And it makes it perform better in a lot of ways than a flat grind because it's easier to reprofile the behind the edge thickness. What I'm interested to do now is to find some different steels other than just 420HC and do the same thing to them and see how much the edge performance explodes, or whether it's too much thinning out and it actually chips because it doesn't have the toughness that this has. So winner number one, CJRB Pyrite, will be going to the final, to the EDC Super Bowl of this round. Spider crawling on me. Ugh. Number two. Now, between the Kershaw Federalist, which I love, and the Civivi Knives Imperium model, man, we got a real similarity here. They're both fairly thin. The Federalist is a little thinner in handle and blade. They're both a flat grind. They're both decently thin behind the edge. The Civivi's a little bit thinner. The edge length is just about the same. The overall length is a little bit bigger on the Imperium because you've got this little finger choil up here. Anyway, with my priorities of liking a thin edge, a flat grind, a long, narrow blade, and comfortable, like, hand texturing, these two both hit that so perfectly on the head. When it comes to steel, I definitely find that the aggression lasts really, really well in this Kershaw Federalist, while the smoothness of this Nitro V is incredible. I think overall, I'm equally pleased with either steel. So there hasn't been a lot to make the final decision for me. There are two things. And one is that this is more grippy, and I do like the grip of this micarta a lot. I do like that a little bit better than this carbon fiber handle, which feels a little bit slick, although the shaping is done so well it almost doesn't matter because it's pretty hard for your hand to go anywhere. However, that does lean things slightly in the direction of the Federalist. The deployment is like perfection on the Imperium. It's just ridiculous. There's not a lot of things you can't do with it. There's not a lot of ways you can't open it. So definitely liked the action better on this, which brings us back to kind of a draw. The steel I'm equally pleased with both ways for different reasons. And so I think the thing that it really comes down to in the end is I don't mind having a slip joint, but it does limit some of the tasks that I'm willing to put a knife to. And so in the end, I think the lock of this Imperium really clinches it in for the win, and I'm going to take it on to the last round. It'll be Imperium versus CJRB Pyrite, and I think I'm going to sharpen them both fine. The reason for that is that we've compared aggression, we've compared working edges, toothy edges in the slip joints, and what we have yet to compare is the fine edge characteristics. And I would like the winner of this whole tournament to not just be better at one particular type of edge, but to actually take a variety of edges better. So we'll go back to the sharpening stones with these two guys, and we'll bring them back for the final. Quick paper test between the Imperium and, which is not a lot of problems, and I actually haven't stropped this one up as much. Or this one either, I guess, so that is pretty fair. But the Federalist, really good working edge. It's a little louder, you know, it's kind of, because it's that 400 grit on the Veneve, FEPA 400 grit finish. It doesn't slide through quite as nicely. So we are reaching the end sort of the really satisfying working edge capacity of this Federalist. I definitely think that I have a slot in my final carry setup for this guy. I think I'll keep it. I really like it a lot. But for the sake of the tournament, I think Imperium takes the cake. This drop point, this shape, there's so much goodness going on with this knife, guys.
Okay, for those of you who are more visual, you can pause if you would like, but this is the way that this tournament has shaken out, with the ones going on to the final being the CJRB Pyrite and the Civivi Imperium. What a duel.
If you want to see the last episode where the Civivi Imperium took on the Civivi Appalachian Drifter 2, I will put the link on screen now for the rest of you. I'll say peace out from the home slice, and I'll see y'all when I come back from America.